Hi everybody, I'm Scott Stewart. I'm going to take a minute or two and let everybody introduce themselves. I know the program this says cotton insect early season. That's not really what this is. We can certainly talk about that, but I'm just going to call this the Insect Roundtable, and we'll probably try to make it an annual event. And the topic that we try to focus on varies a little bit from year to year. Last year we really focused on the bollworm because it was timely, and I'm sure that's something we're going to talk about this year. One of the things we're going to really try to hit on this year is some of the things that Angus just already hit on, and I know Gus did this morning, talking about understanding the thresholds and having some tolerance, and you know when we need to adjust and when we don't need to adjust. And we got some slides, and we may use some of them to make some points, but it's really supposed to be more of a discussion and back and forth. So it's going to help a lot if you all interact. But I don't want to waste too much time introducing, but we got a lot of folks up here, so I'm just going to let Dr. Gore start on the end by introducing himself.
Jeff Gore, Mississippi State University.
Don Cook, Mississippi State.
Gus Lorenz, University of Arkansas.
Whitney Crowe, Mississippi State.
Ben Thrash, University of Arkansas.
I'm Hank Jones. I'm an ag consultant in Northeast Louisiana.
And Scott Stewart, UT.
My name is Catchot at Mississippi State. Matt Miles, I'm from Princeton University. I mean, everybody else, you know, I'm a farmer in Southeast Arkansas.
Sebe, I'm from LSU.
And so again, I know it said this was cotton insect and early season management, and we can talk about that, but really, you know, to be honest, this whole started from some of the discussions we had, certain experiences this year, where we had just a weird year anyhow, and we had some things that were just frankly kind of annoying to us at times, you know, people calling you about very small levels of mold damage, or you know, not quite understanding how products work, and some of the zero tolerance stuff, which has become an issue, and this is kind of an effort not to be too preachy, but to kind of remind everybody that there is some reasons why we make some of these decisions that are really economically minded. And I saw a couple presentations today where folks went through their budgets very detailed, and you all know this is pretty thin. You know, $20 mistake can be the difference between being profitable and not profitable, and that $20 can be wasted insecticide or it can be wasted crop. So there's a couple of ways you got to learn to manage that, and they're not necessarily the same thing. I don't know, since our longtime leader has been Gus Lorenz, I might let him start off by making a few comments, and maybe we can get some questions going.
So, I just say, you know, I guess for me, this has kind of come up in the last couple of years. And a prime example is working with growers and consultants and educating them on this virus. That if you saw Ben talk today and Rob, they both mentioned, you know, the work with Heligen. And kind of what I'm seeing as I go around and I walk fields with producers and consultants is we go out in the field and we're looking at the virus, and they see a damaged pod in the soybean field, and they just fly undone, like their hair's on fire. Oh my God, here's a damaged pod. And my concern is that it seems like we have this issue out there with both consultants and growers, and I think there's a lot of guilt to be slung around about it, but if you know anything about soybeans, you realize the amazing ability of that plant to compensate and even overcompensate for damage. Benny did a lot of work on his PhD, and we've done this work in the Mid-South where we see defoliation actually increase yield. We see it with square retention in cotton. You know, it's better to hold 80–85% of the fruit rather than 95 to 100% of the fruit. And we see actually a yield bump. When we did all our threshold work with plant bugs in cotton, you know, and this zero tolerance, there's just no room for it. We've got to find a way to look at the crop and see a little bit of damage and realize that it's not hurting yield and that it's not. And if we over spray and we have zero tolerance for no damage, we're costing the grower ultimately money. And that's not where we want to be. And that's what we've seen the last few years as we develop some of these products that are coming down the line. We're gonna have to be a little tolerant. You're gonna have to live with a little damage out there. It's about economics and the bottom line. That's what we're trying to get to, is be profitable for the producer, and there's just no room for zero tolerance with insects in that situation. Okay, is that good?
Yeah, and I got a slide up there that Don Cook actually submitted. He may want to comment on some of this kind of foundation work that we did to set our new bollworm, corn earworm thresholds in soybean, because we revised those in the region, and Don, with his student, led a lot of that effort. And it was a lot of work, guys. I'm gonna tell you. You know, I'll be the first to admit there's no such thing as a perfect threshold. You just can't have it. Can't be one number all the time. So they're intentionally built a little conservatively. But we were doing a lot of caging work and putting moths in there and getting larvae going in there. And I remember pulling off several of the cages one year we did that at R4, and there was not a pod on those plants. And that hurt yield, but it hurt yield by about 50%. And I just make that point to say, there's some pretty impressive compensation that can occur sometimes. So, you know, when somebody says, I got 3% pod damage and it's R3 or R4, that's really zero. It's closer to zero than being impactful, in my opinion. So I don't know, Don, if you want to make some comments.
Well, just to tie into that, we did, and I don't want to brag, or sound like I'm bragging, but it was a bunch of work. And what we come out is at $9 beans, one bollworm for 25 sweeps is going to eat about $1.50 worth of beans. Well, you know, and we all get calls, you know, folks get antsy. I'm running 3, 4, 5. They get antsy. Well, what happens if you decide I can't stand it anymore and I'm gonna spray it? It costs you $20 an acre with an airplane and everything. At 4, you're gonna lose about $14 an acre. So, and go to the next one, you're talking about the compensation. This is, you know, Brian Adams' PhD work, which was the threshold stuff too. We went in there at these growth stages and either took half the fruit structures off, pods, flowers, you name it, to either half or every one of them off. Out to R4, you could take half of them off and not reduce yield. Now, at R2, you could take them all off and it didn't reduce yield. And as you've got further out, by taking every piece of fruit off the soybean plant, you know, you got some yield reduction. But like Scott said, out of R5.5, you took everything off, it's about a 50% yield reduction. And it just kind of stair steps as you go further back. But beans compensate way more than we probably think they do. And bollworm is a different animal in beans than it is in cotton. They feed on leaves a lot more than they do in cotton. And if you just pull up a soybean plant and a cotton plant and look at the amount of fruit on each one, soybean has way more pods on it than the cotton plant has bolls. So each one of them is not as valuable as say a cotton boll.
Yeah, I think that kind of reminds me of another point. It's a different crop, and our insecticide efficacy is way different on soybean than cotton. You know, we kind of all know if you get a week behind in cotton against a big population, you're not going to clean it up very well. With soybean, you have some opportunity. Just our efficacy is so much higher.
And I think that those larvae move so much from leaves to pods back and forth. Your chance of exposure to that product you put out there is much greater in beans than it is in cotton.
An important point around that is, y'all hear us talk about thresholds a lot. And the thing to remember is, when we talk about thresholds, the threshold is not an economic injury level. The economic injury level is somewhere way above that threshold of what it's gonna, the amount of damage is gonna equal the cost of the spray. That threshold has some wiggle room,
There you go.
figured into it.
They really do, they're set conservative, and this is an old graph you might get, like I might show somebody when I taught IPM in the day, but, you know, you hit that number, and the idea is that threshold, you're spraying before you hit economic loss, economic damage, where your cost to your control is cheaper than the loss you've incurred. And, you know, if you do zero tolerance, you're gonna, I mean, you have to spray 3 or 4 times to keep that going. And, you know, it's just, I think we need to keep these things in mind. You know, our thresholds are not perfect, but they're a lot more dynamic than we think we are. You know, the dynamic threshold changes over time. We do that a lot. We don't even think that. You know, we have a thrips threshold, but we say, well, after you hit 4th leaf, you don't spray anymore because the threshold is not near as susceptible. And there's reasons for that. Has anybody in the room used Heliogen on soybean? With pretty good success? Or?
Real good.
That's a classic, to me, product of expectations, because if somebody has the expectation of 0.5 damage, they hate it. They do not like that product.
Or they're just gonna kill every worm.
Yeah, and if they use it and kind of get used to it, and they don't start with that expectation, they start to realize there's some advantages in economics, and Gus had more experience than probably anybody with that product, but it's been used quite a bit in the Mid-South. It's really one of the few biologicals we like. It worked pretty well, it has a fit.
But anybody that thinks they're gonna go out there and zero that population out with Heliogen, they're not gonna do it, and they're gonna see a little bit of population. That's just the way it works. And I think we all gotta get accustomed, especially like Matt Miles, you know, having zero tolerance, and he's gonna be extra cautious, and he's gonna spray on a half threshold, right, Matt?
I have. If I've got enough half thresholds with enough insects. But to what y'all are saying, you know, 25 years ago, my dad passed away in 2000, but we farmed cotton, you know, we didn't have corn, and we put beans on our worst ground, you know, they were $6, $7, and he was zero tolerance, you know, and I had to come out of that mindset, you know, and on cotton, it's like you said, it's a lot different because you got less fruit there, and there's so many other things that can happen from boll rot. So if you lose some of the insects, then you got to worry about boll rot at the end. But I appreciate the thresholds. I appreciate the work you do, and it gives us a guide to go by. And I would say, Rob's been here, my consultant, but I would say 90%, 95% of the time we do what y'all tell us to do on that. I mean, why don't you know, we're going to listen to you because you do the work. You know.
And Heliogen's another example, Gus, where we really are telling people to spray on that half threshold.
Right.
In a way, because we've adjusted that threshold down to account for the way the product works, and also because it's substantially cheaper, which makes it more affordable to spray.
Hey Scott, if you would back up on the slide, I was wanting to, well, the one that you showed,
Which one?
the graph of it. Right there where it says the economic injury level and the economic threshold considers efficacy of the control. Y'all comment on that as university guys, because I know that's one thing that plays into a consultant. You know, we're looking at insect populations is that, you know, we know we've got, and I'll use the plant bugs and cotton, we've got, let's just say Indian clover. It sucks, all right? You know, we can all agree on that, I think. But it's got a time period in which we do use it with some, I guess, success. But, and then you got transform, diamond, stuff like that gives us a good control. How should, when you say considers the efficacy of the control, how do we need to approach that? I'll let you wise learned men educate us on that.
That's actually a really complicated question, so I'm going to let Angus answer it.
Well, of course, efficacy plays there, and I think Heliogen's probably one of the better examples. We know how that product works, therefore we're not spraying it on the same threshold as we're spraying it on some of the others. You know, these everybody up here will tell you, I mean, we do put a lot of work in developing these thresholds.
And to develop them, I mean, there's a complex formula. The first thing we gotta figure out is how much damage, whatever pest we're interested in, that individual pest can cause to whatever crop we're talking about. So figuring these out sometimes take years to do. But at the same time, every one of us recognize, everybody on this panel will tell you that we can't represent every situation. The biggest problem I see, one is I don't think unless, you're if taken an entomology class, a lot of people, and Scott talked about this earlier, really understand the difference between the economic injury level and threshold. A threshold, there's wiggle room built in there. You're not losing money when you hit threshold. So you don't need to cheat the threshold because you think you're gonna lose money if they're at threshold. The problem, one of the problems that I see, and this is hard to fix, we've made some efforts to do this, is really how you sample. There's a lot of difference between consultant to consultant, but when we develop a threshold, they're based on a certain sample technique. We know that we're not accounting for, let's just say you're talking about spraying egg threshold in cotton on Bogart too. You might say, well, I know I'm not finding every egg in that field, so if I find 2 eggs, it's probably really 20, so I'm gonna spray. Well, we know that there's more eggs in the field before we say it needs to be 20 or whatever it is. We know that, but we're taking a sample, it's a sample. A great example, this is a really good example. Last year, we had that trickle effect of worms, wound up taking a little more damage in the cotton than people were comfortable with. I think 99% of those situations were not economical, not even close to being something economical damage, but it made people nervous. But we had some folks out there, and I'm not saying what they were doing was wrong. We had some folks out there on their hands and knees looking at every single piece of fruit, structure, bloom tag on 10 foot of road. And they were finding way more than we would find. But that's fine, they weren't wrong, but our threshold is not set up for somebody that samples like that. That is not, I mean, they're gonna always find more than us and think that there's a problem. I mean, when we get these scout schools and all this kind of stuff, if we say that we're basing stuff on a 25 sweet, threshold, we're talking about hitting the plant a certain way. And I pass these scouts in the field, I see them, from the truck or whatever, and they're hitting this much at the top of the plant, and they're using our threshold, they're not gonna get the right answer. So, I mean, just knowing how we're talking about sampling whatever pest makes as big of a difference as probably anything. If you're over sampling, you're gonna hit threshold way more than is probably justified. You're not wrong, but you're not doing it like we developed the threshold. And that's really hard for some people to get, because they don't know what goes
One
into
way
the
to look at
threshold.
it is, you're catching X amount using this method. That does not represent the absolute number in that field. I mean, it's a relative number that you catch using that method, and then there's a yield loss associated with that level of precision. It's not an absolute, there's 3,000 larvae per acre. Doesn't represent that.
But the reason I said that's complicated, Hank, because it's really kind of a push-pull. So you take a product like imidacloprid, which isn't the most effective thing we spray. If it's not so effective, you think, well, I shouldn't spray it because I'm not getting the value out of it. On the pull of it is, it's much more inexpensive. So you those kind of offset. And you could take Prevathon for bollworm as an example. If it would cost $20 and was half as effective, we'd be much less likely to spray it. But we got that same, it's highly effective. It's the best thing we got, so that kind of makes us more inclined to spray it. But the cost of the product makes it so it kind of balances out. And it probably doesn't affect things as much as you think. If a product's so ineffective it doesn't work, then you shouldn't use it. That's really the story there.
Well, and that kind of plays into, like, we use imidacloprid prior to bloom in Louisiana. And so with that stage of cotton, you can take more damage than you can, say, the 3rd week or 4th week of bloom. So if you're using a product that's not quite as effective, and you still have 85% square retention, you can get away using imidacloprid early, but you're not going to get away with it late because you can't sacrifice that amount of loss, later in the season.
And kind of back to what I was talking about the way people sample, I think if you see a little bit of damage and you go back to that field, we had a lot of people that thought they had control failures with the diamides last year on bollworm. And when they would go back behind, because they'd hear about other people talking about this, and they'd go back behind a diamide spray, they would sample way harder, and, you know, like I was talking about, looking at a whole lot of more fruit than they normally do, and this and that. And so then they would find more, and then they'd think, well, I got a control failure. When we come out and sample the fields, I could find exactly what they would find if I did it like that, but it wasn't even nowhere near what I would call a control failure in most situations. They were oversampling to a large degree and coming up with a different answer, thinking they had product control failures. That was led to a lot of this. We chased a lot of that down last year. But it made us, and that's kind of why we're talking about some of this today, think from an extension education standpoint, maybe we just need to go back and explain some of this better, than we've had in the past. Tell you what goes into some of these, these decisions that we make.
But and it's rolling around out there somewhere, somebody's got it in their mind. They go, okay, Gus, I'm running about a half threshold on stink bugs and a half a threshold on bollworms, and I got some bean leaf beetles and some three-cornered alfalfa. Don't you think I ought to just go ahead and clean it up? Now, who's thinking that? Right. See, that's the deal. That's the deal, thresholds are great, right? If that's all you got out there, and I'm looking for a bollworm threshold, and it's 9 per 25 or 4 or 5 with pelagian wool, that's fine, but I got this, and I got this, I got these other things that are out there, and they're not at threshold, but I got multiple species, and so should I go ahead and clean it up? How do you address that, Angus?
Well, the way I address it depends on what they are. If you got grasshoppers, bean leaf beetles, loopers, you name it, that all feed on foliage, they're all causing the same kind of damage. So we do have a threshold in soybeans that actually accounts for all those multiple species. It's called 20% total defoliation. You still got to go out there and know what the primary one is so you can target an insecticide against it. But if you got all of that complex out there, and a third of a threshold of stink bugs, you still got a third of a threshold of stink bugs. They're not adding. They cause damage in different ways. So it's not like one is necessarily adding to the other. And you just gotta be smart about it. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, we're not gonna beat you over the head with IPM. We all believe in it. Some great examples, and Scott tells these stories all the time. We got the same situation in the Mississippi Hills. These little small fields in a farm, farming across 4 counties. If my equipment is in this county today, and I'm 3/4 threshold, and you tell me no matter what, it is not coming back for a month. It's either go or not go. That might make my decision different. I mean, it might not, but it's definitely something you gotta take into account. That's just using, common sense to do that kind of stuff. And if you make the famous one is I'm going across the field, okay? There's situations that if you're going across the field, it makes sense. Because what goes into these economic thresholds we're talking about is the cost of application. So if you look at the bollworm threshold that we've worked out that has all that factored in there, if I'm going across the field, that reduces the price of my insecticide. It changes your threshold. So, I mean, you are taking that into account. But sometimes it just doesn't make sense, even if you're going across the field, depending on what the test is.
I mean, it's always going to require professional judgment, guys. These are biological systems they're complicated, and it's people. I mean, if I'm talking on the phone with somebody, I got a consultant back there that can find a worm from 100 feet away. And if he calls me and says he's got 10% worms, I'm not very scared. Because I'd probably find 5 if I was in that same field. I got some guys that say, I saw a couple worms. He said, "Fuck, God, you should have sprayed that." And I think Angus actually put a slide in there. I might have it. But, you really do got to count. And part of this is our job to train folks how to do it. And, if you're a professional consultant, you got to train your folks how to do it. I don't know if I got that slide in there or not, but just a bunch of bowl damage. But I'll tell a story on a consultant that isn't in this room, just because it was kind of humorous. But a couple of years ago, when Bollguard 2 wasn't working very well, called me up and they said, "I've got 50% bowl damage in my Bollguard 2. I said, "I'll be there now." So I got in the truck and I They said they're gonna meet me at the field, they gave me directions, I got there before, and I thought I was in the wrong field. Now, there was some bollworm damage, it was about 8 or 10% bollworm damage on my counts. But I thought I was in the wrong field, and by the time I was on the phone, they pulled up, I was in the right field. And I said, you gotta show me this 50%. And so we started going out there, and I was doing my counts again, and they were falling behind me. And they were, as they were walking down, it's the end of the season, you know how you pick out those yellow bowls at the top. And while I'm doing my counts, they pick one, every 4 or 5 steps, they pick one out. And I said, I've got 10% again. And they looked at me and said, well, you're not very good at finding worms. I took a little offense to that. And so I got a snap, and I said, well, you know, if all I was doing is just walking around and picking out bowls that, you know, that I saw while I was walking down the road, I could get 50% too. I can pick out 50%. So, you know, we actually sat down and we did a count of actual bowl damage. And, you know, it was certainly much higher than the top of the canopy, but across 10-foot of row, it was about 10%. And you gotta put that in perspective. It's pretty easy to go down sometimes and pick out those big escaped worms every 3 or 4 feet. And it doesn't necessarily, you know, just because it's the ones you're looking at, it's not necessarily 50% bowl damage. So, yeah, some things it's easier to account for. You can really force yourself sometimes to do those counts, you know. Well, how bad is it? Square retention is a great example. Every time I walk into the field that's got 80% square retention, it looks awful to me. And Eric's sitting there. I mean, you think, oh my gosh, it's ate up. And then if you sit down and actually start doing the counts, you realize it's not as bad as the appearance of it. So that's one that, you know, training's part of it.
Yeah, I had the same situation in beans this year with bollworms, where this wasn't a consultant, it was a retail scout that called me out to the field, and he was walking through going, look, that plant has damage, that plant has damage, that plant has damage. I said, well, just slow down. So we started counting those plants, and they had 80 pods on them, and 4 of them would be damaged. And then we walk down the road counting plants, and there'd be 40 plants before we hit another one, and might have 3 out of 80 pods damaged. And once we slowed down and did that, I think Whitney was with me on that one. You know, he's like, oh, well, it's not so bad.
Well, and something I try to, you know, tell the growers, at least in Louisiana, we have red banded stink bugs, and I'm sure everybody else in the Delta is gonna have them this year too, so. You know, you take yield potential into consideration. Is your field historically 90 bushels, or do you only expect 40? And so, you know, tailor your expectations from there. You know, when are you gonna take them to the elevator? Because if you take a load of beans to the elevator in July, like guys in South Louisiana do, versus November, you know, you can take more damage in July because they won't buy the beans. In November, you may have to be a little bit more aggressive, because if you have 5% damaged beans, they may put you on salvage because they don't need them. So there's other factors that play into it other than just insecticides and just thresholds. It's everybody, how the market around you works. And do they want beans? Do they need them? You know, what your yield potential is? And, you know, a lot of factors that are just beyond, it's more economic, but it's also factors into the management threshold that you may need to be a little bit more aggressive later season, even though your beans may not be worth as much, but you have to be a little bit more aggressive, because if you take any damage, you may not be able to sell it. So that's something that, at least in Louisiana, we fight quite a bit. And I know Hank's really good about bringing me the docket sheets from the elevator after a certain time where, you know, you get 70% damage and you're only pulling $1.50 bushel per bean. So, I mean, I think that plays more than just what you see in the farm as far as, you know, not that it really affects thresholds, but as management strategies.
And what I think is interesting about that is I don't even think they check it in Tennessee, because we don't really have that reputation, you know, having stink bug damage. So even when we have it, I don't think we probably get caught for it. So I mean, again, professional judgment and experiences matter. You just got to be careful not to use it as an excuse. You know, you got to kind of hold yourself to the fire. I think your feet to the fire a little bit. I've had this picture up here several times, and I hesitate to ask this question, but you're talking about going over the field. I get this one a lot. Putting a fungicide on corn. We got $2.50 pyrethroids. Why wouldn't I put it in my corn? And I asked, why would you? And I got in a little bit of a, I won't say an argument, but a Twitter exchange with a consultant from Arkansas. He said he thought it was controlling corn oil and helping his yields. And I I hate to be blunt, but I know that's not true. We've just got data after data after data. This is a picture of some data slides that we worked on with Mississippi. Sandy Stickle did that. It's really amazing that corn earworm does not cause more economic damage than it does. In fact, I'd have a hard time, I don't think I could prove to you in Tennessee that the corn earworm causes economic damage to corn.
On that route, I'm gonna ask everybody, how many kernels per year do you think it takes to reduce corn yield on field corn?
40.
Well, you've already seen my.
It's 3 kernels to a bushel.
How many, on non-BT corn, which is, kind of what you compare it to, how many do you think on average a bollworm or bollworm larvae will damage?
Less than half of that.
It's about 11.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think Angus uses data in the talk to make a point that sometimes the data says there is no threshold. And this is an example from Sandy Steckle's degree. She did some with larvae and some with artificial damage, where she literally shucked corn back at a couple different growth stages and just damaged the heck out of it. And that's how, on the bottom graph, there's how many kernels she damaged in that ear. And then you're seeing the weight of those ears right there. And until you got over 30 kernels per ear, you could not reduce yield. And what was really interesting about it that I did not expect is what was going on is the rest of the kernels in the ears got a little bit bigger. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. If you got fewer kernels in the ear, the remaining energy is going to go to those other ones. So there are no doubt in Tennessee there are times you spray field corn, especially non-BT. In the presence of southwestern corn borer, I increase yield in a lot of my tests because of southwestern corn borer. I've not been able to do it with corn earworm. In fact, 9 times out of 10, you can't reduce damage by spraying it anyhow. One spray just does nothing. You kill one and 3 are lined up to take its place. So, and Tucker knows this because he raises sweet corn. You might as well not spray sweet corn if you're just going to spray it once or twice.
I mean, how many applications y'all have on sweet corn?
Oh, you can go from 16 to 20
I
every
got,
other day.
I got a question. How many growers we got in the room? We can get on y'all a little bit. Not bad, not bad. I mean, it's a conversation that we have to have. We got a huge independent consultant base in the whole Mid-South. I mean, these guys are educated, they know exactly what to do. If y'all knew how many times I hear, though, that I can't do this on this grower or whatever, it's because a lot of growers have conditioned their consultant to make a decision that they wouldn't make ordinarily, especially even on their own farm. And I'll give you an example of that. Let's say that you're growing cotton and you're about 3 leaves and you're going over it, whatever, field or something. And you don't really have any thrips in that field, you make an overspray. But the consultant has been told by the grower, do not tell me in 2 days while I'm going across the field today to come back across this acre with thrip shot alone. So they're going to spray you every time because they got to. I mean, we've had consultants lose jobs because, and I mentioned this a little bit in my talk today, because they left a whip in the top of the plant that did not contribute to yield. Probably 1% of the total yield, the top 4 nodes are naked. Well, it might have fell out anyway. That happens all the time. It might have fell out anyway. But we do have a lot of, I'm not saying y'all or any of the ones that do it, but we have a lot of growers. It's not that, I don't blame the field guy, the consultant, or whatever, but we have a lot of growers that's literally threatened the consultant's job if they were not super aggressive, and if they cost their own self. The consultant knows in these situations, but we have that a lot that it goes on. And I don't know if it's because, a lot of growers are businessmen and they're not as in tune to compensation of plants and the whole agronomic thing. Some are, some aren't. But there's so many growers that, have really threatened the job of the consultant over certain things. So they're going to be more aggressive on those growers. And the growers are fine with that, but it's costing them a lot of money. It's getting in their back pocket.
I might let Whitney talk a little bit about the dollar plant, the money plant that Johnny Jenkins developed years ago. And I'm just going to make an initial comment here. If you look at this this, and Whitney's, I've seen her give this talk, really the size of that hole on that graph represents the value of that position on the cotton acre. I think one point we need to recognize though is, I promise you can do this, you can go out there and take that, you can go out there when that's a square and pull it off every plant in your field, and you will never see a yield response. It will compensate. Now, there's a limit to that. If you keep letting that happen down the field, there's a limit to that. But Whitney might want to comment about that, because I think you've done some tests actually recently.
Actually, it's Chase Samples test
Chase.
that he did, simulating plant
Let me
bug
see if I can
injury.
find that.
And what they did is removed 50 and 100% at first bloom, and this is in addition to some PGR applications, but I'm gonna focus on the simulated boll or fruit removal. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that when we talk about, so we know when we have injury, and depending on when the injury is, we might delay maturity. But depending on environmental conditions in the fall, we may be able to overcome that injury without any yield losses. And you can see here in the instance of removing 50 and 100%, you can see that there is some delay in maturity. So this is with node above crack bowl, and you can see that the 0% has about 5 nodes above crack bowl, and that's followed by then the 50 and the 100%. But if you look at how that corresponds to yield, so we know we have some delay in maturity. With that 50% fruit removal, there is no yield differences between that and the 0%. You can see that the 100% didn't compensate to the same level, but it's only about 129 pounds shy of the other two treatments. So there was still a fair amount of compensation even with 100% fruit removal. So you need to be mindful in some of these situations that the plant does have the ability to compensate from injury, and there's other examples outside of this, and Dr. Gore did some bollworm examples, that we have the ability to compensate, and that's something that you just need to be mindful of in various situations.
And I think a real take home is, we're not recommending 50% as a threshold. We're just saying it's not necessarily the end of the world. If you get lower, you can afford it. 80%, when you hit 80%, which is our threshold, you better get more aggressive on plant bugs. You still have some time to react. Now, I will tell you, when you get in these low, this is one environment, it's a good growing environment. It doesn't always work this way. You know, sometimes you can take substantial yield loss. But one thing that separates bugs from artificial damages, they keep coming. So when you get in this situation where you have very modest fruit load, you can't afford to make as many mistakes down the road because you have fewer fruit left to protect and absorb that injury. So that's one of the reasons we have, some built-in tolerances, and, that threshold's lower than the economic
Kind
injury.
of a funny story.
Well, I was gonna add to this about, whenever you have that 100%, and this is just a general question for you guys, and that's kind of how I see myself being on this town. So, I'm asking questions. So, whenever you have that 100%, it's just one of those worst case scenarios, and, or even 50%. In our mind, we're gonna tighten up, and we're gonna lower that threshold because we can't get behind her. If we got really late planted cotton, that late May planted cotton, we gotta hurry up and make that crop. Talk about how we need to treat our thresholds in that situation when we've got an inadequate fruit set, or we got that late planted crop and we don't have that extra month to make cotton. So what should we do with our thresholds in that situation?
If you're that way, I think your yield potential expectations need to be lower anyway, because you got a shorter growing season.
No, and that's the thing, and that's what we were talking about earlier, where nothing replaces common sense. We commonly, last year especially, because we had so much really late planted cotton, and we talked about stuff like that, maybe being more aggressive and protecting the plant. I mean, and that's where y'all come in, y'all's good judgment. I mean, some things just make sense. But a funny story about this slide, Whitney showed this slide I wrote about Stewart for us, and he was talking about some of Chase's work there. Well, about a week later, I got a call from a grower, Bert, I can't remember who it was, in Knoxville County. He said, hey, you know that lady, the new entomologist, that showed that data, I ain't never spraying another plant bug. I said, whoa. Thanks. I said, that's not what she said. What she said is under the right environment, cotton has the ability to compensate. He said, well, I thought it looked like it didn't lose. I said, no, that's not what we're saying. Not at all what we're saying.
Do we have an idea on what the harvest dates were when we removed 50 and 100%? I know years ago with mold weevil, they always said we could take really heavy damage and we still had the same yield, but in one situation we were picking cotton in November and one you were picking cotton in December. So was there a delay in harvest because of?
Well, that's actually what this slide was showing, is a delay in maturity. And I'd say anytime you take enough damage that you're substantially delaying maturity, you've gone too far. I mean, if you start to lose a couple of nodes of maturity, you're probably buying a week, which a week can cost you, especially in our environment in the north. That question he hit, I've had that experience myself on some on-farm testing, where we came back from one week to the next, and we went from 90 to 20% square retention, and we never recovered. It was very late planted cotton, and the plant bugs never let off. And I mean, we made some cotton, don't get me wrong, but we had some other treatments out there that were much more aggressive, as actually when we were doing our threshold work, and they kicked butt compared to that one, because we just kind of lucked out and hit that plant bug movement with that spray. So
And I think something really to keep in mind with all this stuff we're talking about, we're not telling y'all, hey, y'all can relax, threshold, everything's gonna be okay. We're not, I mean, if I'm trying to make an A on a test, I wish I could just study enough to make a 90. I gotta study enough to make 100 to make a 90. And it's the same thing with this crop. I understand we're trying to do all this, but if you find yourself in this situation, what we're saying is a lot of the things that we saw last year where people were so upset was not a problem. And just trying to relate to you that, both in, especially beans, more so than anything, but even in cotton, they have a lot of ability to compensate. It don't mean it's the end of the world. I mean, it wasn't nobody's fault last year that 2 or 3% egg would turn into 2 or 3% mold damage. And it ain't nothing you did, but it's not bad. I mean, that's kind of what we're really trying to portray here.
Going back to like being more aggressive on those later planted, cotton stuff. Remember some of my PhD research where we planted soybeans at 6 different planting dates over 3 months. I think we planted all the way from early April all the way out to late June. And I defoliated those plants at V4 100%. And those plants that were planted later in June, we were getting about a 30% yield reduction from that defoliation at V4, whereas stuff planted, in early April, we're actually seeing a yield bump from that defoliation on those earlier planted ones. So yeah, certainly there's research on that.
And that's why it's so hard to come up with a perfect threshold.
Right.
You really, the data you need to really do that, it just makes us.
And kind of thinking along those lines, we're looking, at least starting off with another wet year. We've got some backwater in the South Delta. We put a lot of red-banded stink bugs in overwintering last fall. It may get to a point, if we end up in a situation like 2017 with all these red-banded stink bugs, do we need to actually plant those beans June 15th? Because it may, if you put a pencil to it, and it takes 3 or 4 stink bug applications, you might be money ahead keeping the seed in the bag.
And speaking about that, what about sub-threshold levels for weeks? Red-banded stink bugs, let's say we had a cold year. Red-banded stink bugs I'm at 2 to 3. My threshold's 4. And I've got guys, I've done 2 to 3, but I've been there for a month. And it's like, well, all that damage is going to be added over time because they're going to pierce pods and start doing damage, quality losses. So I mean, there's a difference when it comes to, sub-threshold level damage for certain things and also for others. So it's going to, that's going to make a difference.
And the treatment.
You have green bean syndrome as well. Not that it's a direct causative agent, but stink bugs are a pretty big link to it. Any kind of stress. So yeah, you may not hit threshold, but you may not see the ramifications of that until the end of the season when you've got a solid field of green stem beans and you can't run a combine with it. So
That's the tricky thing about red bands for us, is that it's more than one level of injury. We can get yield loss, but we can also get this quality loss. And that's hard to interpret during the growing season.
Just like Angus said, these thresholds are not set in stone, and they're not absolutes. You got to use some of your judgments and common sense for what's going on in that situation.
It's also important to remember, red band is a completely different critter. Don't transfer what we're talking about to red band into a southern green. Just a night and day difference. That thing just, it's vicious. It's a completely different story.
Well, coming from a farmer's perspective, I've been just sitting there listening, and listening to Angus, and I made the comment that you just, I probably said it to Rob. I'm going over this field 2 days later, I don't need to come back and spray the trees. I feel like most people in here are not producers. I think a few people raise your hand, but you gotta realize a farming operation our size is a $3 to $4 million crop farm. Then you've got landlords that own sharing, okay? So you're dealing with a basket case when you start out. If you're a university or a consultant or whatever, you're dealing with a guy at that point in time that's mind's going in a million different directions. He's worried about the trade war, Trump's tweets, you know, the thresholds and all that going on. You're talking about the buggy whip, you know, and the cotton. I've seen where landowners don't share rent, regardless if the yield's less or not. My cotton's gonna look like that next year. Those other 5 people that call me this year wanting to rent your farm, I'm gonna give it to one of them. So there's a lot of other variables. We're scared to death. We're running scared all the time. So a lot of times, you know, we buy insurance on our house for fire. So a lot of times we're buying insurance, we're doing different things if it's close or whatever, just to try to get to the end of the year and still be able to rent the land.
And I promise you this, we are all very sensitive to that. I mean, we do have an appreciation for that. And I've told people to do some things that I would not tell other people to do based on some of those kind of situations all the time. We're just trying to lay out right now the reality of a lot of things that are, you know, that are going on. But we are absolutely sensitive. Sometimes things just make sense to do on this farm that might not make sense on somebody else's farm.
Y'all open my eyes a lot today. Just, I mean, I've learned a lot just being on this panel, listening to the other side.
But I can promise you, pretty much everyone on this panel has made a recommendation when a pest was not quite at threshold. Because of logistics, what we thought was gonna happen in the next few days. Sometimes, you know, I mean, Don gave the example about bollworm being at 4 worms, but there are times that you know that bollworm in August 15th and those late beans is going from 4 to 40. I mean, you can almost bet the farm on it, right? And you're really not probably costing yourself in that situation when you know that's when you have a high confidence that you're gonna get a return on that, whether you spray now or wait for it.
But that's not every situation either.
No, it's not. That wouldn't be normal in Tennessee, but late planted beans in the river bottoms, you know, that's a pretty good chance, you know, that's gonna happen. And, you know,
Your area,
yeah.
Gus's area, I'd say, yeah, a lot of our areas, I'd say, I'd wait, because I've seen 8 turn into 0 in 3 days.
That's right.
They'll crash on you in a heartbeat.
How many consultants do we have in the room? I'll ask this question though, because it's something that I battle a bunch. Is the tendency to want to spray a field on the highway to make it show off a little bit more on the highway than back forward. And it kind of ties in with what I think you were saying too, is that it's a perception thing. That it gets in our mind that we don't want to embarrass a farmer. You know, even though we may be doing a lot of things right.
I'll give you an example. Angus does about a 25 or 30 acre block right there on the highway. And he does the efficacy trials and everything, all that on there, and won't spray it until, you know. And so the farmer finally said, Angus, you got to put up a sign that says, Mississippi State University is doing this because I don't want somebody coming up to me saying, what did you do?
You quit spraying.
But I just had to put up a big sign, I don't want to cost me.
You know, for those of us that are consultants in this room, every one of us has been told at some time.
And then Larry said, you know, I don't want anybody to know that I'm working on that.
I think you quit spraying too soon. We've all heard it. I think you quit spraying too soon.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of the things, like we said, the judgment call, that, you know, these termination rules in cotton, my compliments to all these guys on this panel. These have been researched, refined, re-researched to the point where that's almost scripture way, you know, that we can trust these things. And I was telling John Moore last night that, whenever I was a younger consultant, that I thought I was in a yield competition with all my other consultant peers. I thought that, whoever made the highest yields, that was the best consultant. And over time, I learned quick that that's the best way to put a farmer out of business a lot of times. I was telling John last night that my gauge of success is seeing my farmers make it through stressful periods. We're in a depressed economy, and that, it's our job as consultants to practice IPM. Take what these guys don't just go to their jobs every day and waste their time. So they've got mountains of data. They work longer weeks, longer days than we do most of the time. They've got work crews. There's mountains of data that goes into all these slides and everything. That they give us the information that we need to go out there and make these decisions. So we go out there and we're monitoring crops and insects and stuff like that. And in my conversation with you guys, but one of the things I was going to mention to all of us is that I learned that my success, I felt better knowing that my farmers were able to stay in business because of IPMs and the things that I've been taught to do. And it was just to go out there and have zero tolerance. Because that's the quickest way I found to go out of business. And
Yeah, we're already running over time, but we'll be happy to sit around and chat. I was just gonna say, sometimes you gotta adjust, I think it's funny, I have consultants that I know very well that have a different threshold for one farmer than the other based on their reaction time, right? Hey, thanks everybody for attending. Don't forget to sign up if you need
Thank you, guys. Enjoyed it. That's the best words I've heard spoken in a meeting. I still worry about that's all right.
How I do that, T-saw. And my plan, mine is it's gonna cost me $20 10 days from now, so I gotta factor that in, the price of that. So that's a lot of things that you gotta buy in. It makes sense. I can't do that.
I mean, enough insects in the fields.
To know what you're doing, so I can't afford to do stuff like that. Staying busy.
Almost, all that noise did is make it sell, but
Well, like you got right that shot, 550 with the airplane, whatever. But I didn't recommend it.
I thought
I paid
that.
2/3.
You let the bad out, okay. You know, that's the thing about
It's
this.
crazy.
I'm gonna take that as a green. I'm
that's his stink shot.
And now that everything buildings out, if they can just leave them pick them up, they really, really, yeah.
They're all
But maybe the thank you very much.
I could check every acre of grass in Louisiana. That's they rags out. They brag about these 85 years, but it's just like on this one.
Nobody speaking to
Everybody's got it.
This is your first year, right? So you just had some heavy ground, you couldn't?
No, we didn't have nothing to do with it.
Just couldn't try to.
Contestants up here. They
That might be the only one up
You mess up by not digging? The digging was I don't know anybody. We like to wait some. But when it gets time to dig, we're gonna get trapped. Once we start digging, that's what got us a lot of fun picking. 2 years ago, we went for cars. 6 weeks in try to tell everybody what we're doing. It's so so you have a right state or a big fish? Where'd you get the what do you want me to do?
You're up front already. Wherever you want to sit. I'll sit front. I won't talk. Warm in here.
Well, good afternoon, thanks for hanging around the last session of the day. So what we have here today is we have a roundtable of the winners for the Arkansas Irrigation Yield Contest. And I'm just gonna give you a short presentation on the contest. I'm gonna hand over to Greg, kind of introduce everybody, and then we just want to let everybody have a minute to talk and then ask questions. You can kind of have an interest. I've asked them each to kind of tell their story, why they got in the contest, what they did different, what they learned about irrigation from the contest. So, first off, I would say, Greg Simpson here, Irrigation Program Associate. He pretty much runs this program. With a little help from me and the rest of us, but for the most part, he does all the hard lifting. So this thing is successful because of him and all his work. Going out on Saturdays, yield plots, putting meters in, because it rained all week, and the only time we could do it was on Saturday and Sunday. So he has worked tirelessly to make sure farmers were able to enter the contest, get meters in, got their yields taken out so they could finish harvesting the rest of their crops. So thank you, Greg, for your hard work.
I get nervous when people give me compliments, be careful.
But we had a lot of, it wasn't just Greg, there were a lot of people who got involved.
Yes.
So the idea here is that we want to include county agents, NRCS people, staff, use local extension agent, and listed up here are all the county agents and the NRCS technicians, conservation people that got involved with the contest. So it wasn't just Greg and I and a few of my crew. A lot of people are getting involved in this contest. We've had a lot of support from the industry. So NRCS strongly supports this program financially. We get money for the prizes and support to pay my staff from the Arkansas Soybean Promotion Board, the Arkansas Corn and Grain Sorghum Board. Rice Day donates a seed tote for the rice winner. Mars donates cash for the second place winner. Symmetrics and Micrometer have donated meters, trellis and AgSense soil sensor units for the winners. So all of the first place winners get this equipment. Delta Plastics, cash, Aerometer gives sensors and cash. All in all, these guys have walked away, the first place winners have walked away with somewhere around $20,000 in cash and equipment. What is an irrigation yield contest? It's like a yield contest on steroids, where we're taking into account water also in addition to yield. So we take yield divided by water use, total water, which is made up of irrigation plus rain. So we do the yield like a normal yield contest, yield check. When the water is done with, we track rain with the computer, with farm logs and Climate Corporation, and then we track irrigation water use with a flow meter, propeller flow meter. This is what the winners get. I kind of mentioned this, first, second, third place. First gets around 10,000 or a seed tote. Second place gets 6,000 if you're in rice, 3,000 in corn or soybeans, and then third place gets $1,000. We only let people win first place once. If you win first place in a commodity, you can't enter again. There's the meters. Like I said, we gave over $62,000 away yesterday when we announced all the winners and hand out the prizes. What we do is we seal the meter. We want to make sure that no other water source came into the field, so we seal the meter with these lockable cables. Cut them off. We tape them up. You ever see a meter that looks all dolled up with beautiful looking tape? You know that guy has entered the yield contest in Arkansas. So the idea is you can't remove the meter and irrigate the field and put it back without us knowing about it. And it's just to keep everybody honest. Charge $100, we give that to the local county agent. Supervisor would cover their mileage. And you just have to have the meter out before you first irrigate the field. 30-acre field, got to have a supervisor. We want you to have somebody local help you. Got to enter the contest by the 30th of June. The harvest report's got to be in by the 2nd of November. We don't allow zero grade rice fields in the contest. Grower makes all the decisions. And basically you just harvest 3 acres, top to bottom of the field. Cut your windrows off and cut enough to get basically fill a truck. Make it easy. The idea is to showcase irrigation water management practices, so everybody has used all kinds of things to try to win. And that's the idea. Is, you know, I've got my ideas about how to irrigate, and everybody else has their own ideas. So let's work together and figure out what makes it work. All right, we had pretty good participation, 30 fields from the north to south of the state. That's kind of the distribution. And the neat thing about the contest is everybody gets a report card. So even if you enter the contest and don't win, you get a lot of information about how you did. How did you do with yield relative to everyone else who entered, and what was your water use efficiency relative to everybody else who entered?
How many fields did you have entered last year?
About the same. We had 29 last year, 30 this year. But a lot of people tell us they would have entered except for the weather. It's very wet spring, it's hard to get things done.
If there's any kind of personnel limitations to growing it or
This year there were a lot of limitations being able to enter the contest. I mean, you had to make a decision, you're going to mess with the contest or you get your crop planted. And that was, I think, a big factor this year.
Do you have an estimation of how big you could grow it, how many people could possibly enter?
We have about 80 meters available at this point in time, so we think that's probably the limit. Start with 9 meters.
It doesn't have to be our meter.
Yeah.
Micrometer has been generous, and we got a lot of meters, but if we get a big response, you're gonna have to come up with your own meters. It's first come, first served on that.
If we have our own meters, will you calibrate them? How will you know for sure that they're?
What we do is, you know, you use your meter, and at the end, if you win, we bring it to the station and we compare it to he has a standard meter. He has a standard meter that we know is right, and we put them in line, and we run it at a certain flow. We know the flow. We've got a symmetric flow meter. We've got a calibrated micrometer flow meter. We put all those in line, and you have to be within 5% of our standard meters.
So yeah, if you win, we basically test the meter and test the numbers and we make it too high or low. Then meters are generally fairly good at one flow rate, and they vary either side of that. And so we just make sure they're in spec. And they generally are. So here are the results for the corn. The yields are on the left, irrigation water applied, rain, total water. There's water use efficiency, so the average of the group was 8.1 bushels per inch. Was our water use efficiency, the average yield was 235. The winter was 222 on 1.5 inches of irrigation, 11.4 bushels per inch. And the bottom was 4. So you see there's a big range. And what I tell people is it's not about maximum yield, it's about managing your water. So if you get a huge amount of rainfall all year where you don't have to irrigate, congratulations, you're going to have a great crop. But you didn't have to manage water. You've got to be able to, when you need water, be able to add with irrigation supplement. That's the whole idea behind irrigation, supply what Mother Nature doesn't provide and fill in the gaps. And that's really what the contest is testing and showcasing. Here's the rice. 208 was the yielding, again, not the highest yield. We had a minimum yield, has to be 200 bushel an acre, corn and soybeans. So we had some people that didn't make that. But the water use efficiency on number 1 was 7.2 bushels per inch. And the average is 4.7, that's pretty impressive, on 13 inches. And everybody else is running in the 20s on average.
Is that, hang on, okay. Is that 2 guys that didn't irrigate any?
The 173 is, he didn't meet the minimum yield.
Okay, well.
And the 200 is, he didn't cut the field off the bottom because of,
This is a field that, this guy didn't win because 2 reasons. One, he flushed before we put the flow meter on, and we didn't know that until after the fact. And the second reason is that, the landlord has a big business, They're right beside Balmita, a big business in Duckham, the landlord does, and they can't cut the bottom of the field. And that's in our rules, so the 2 raising fields excluded.
And he's fine with it.
And he's okay, that's not why he does it. He, he showed the report card. The big thing is, lots of people wanna be competitive and see how you're doing against everyone else. But this is a way for you to judge, are you getting better? You look at this year's report card, you look at last year's report card. I think the high numbers here, the highest numbers are a little higher than 2018, and that's because of the rainfall, I think, but I can't, that's my opinion.
Soybean is 112 bushel an acre was winner, and soybean, the top yielding, has been winning the contest. And they're all about the same on the water use, around 6 acre inches. They actually used a little bit more. There were people that didn't yield as much, but used a lot less water, but they still didn't win. So yield's a pretty important component still of water, but it's about, at the end of the day, most crop were dry. So you're great. I'll
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I put this picture in there, just, that kind of picture's worth 1,000 words. Most people's memory of 2019 is not good. Too much rain, happened at the wrong time, a whole month of May it seemed to rain. But there was more preventive claims this year in Arkansas than there's ever been, I think. But it also affected our contest. We was hoping we'd have bigger number of people enter, and they weren't able to because it rained too much. This is John Allen McGraw. He is our rice winner, and I'm gonna let him talk right now.
I had a 40-acre field. It's all a square field and had 6 straight levees in it. And I kind of used a combination of everything. Got a big 5-inch rain in June, and I stopped the bottom pipe up completely, didn't lose a drop of water. So the bottom 3 levees stayed flooded all year long. And I didn't really pump on it much after that, just that overflow from the top go in there. And the top 3 levees, I ran AWD on, that both levees down the side, I ran AWD, I let it dry all the way down, get it dry before I turned the water back on. And it really worked, and it still actually had Roundup on it. I had a neighbor some neighbor, plant board tractor 5 miles away, I don't know where it came from. So I was worried about that. And compared to the 2018 rice verification fields, their average acre inches is 24 acre inches. And you compare that to mine, I saved 11 million gallons, which is about $990 or $24 an acre. So it worked out great. And if it wouldn't have been a contest, I've always been kind of sketchy on AWD. If it wouldn't have been a contest, I wouldn't have tried AWD. So I'm glad I entered it and maybe actually try it out.
That's not a new thing. Alternate wetting and drying has been a concept that's been around for 20 years, maybe 30. But it's just not being adopted.
Who's your supervisor?
Richard.
We got the supervisor here is Scott Crabb and Stephen Stone. Is there a pointer on this?
Yes, sir.
The red?
Greg, I have a question. What plant timing did you do your AWD? Did you do it multiple times or just
Do you know, was you at mid-season when you did your AWD?
I waited
Where was rice at?
3 weeks. I held flood for 3 weeks for the first initial fertilized, and then I started doing after that.
Did you do it multiple times?
Yes.
When did you quit?
When I drained it. I went all the full season.
You went all the way to boot? You went all the way to boot?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Of course, this is a,
Yeah, right.
extraordinary year with the rainfall. It rained all summer and seemed to quit about harvest time. So, there's things people did this year that normally wouldn't work. This is Joey Massey. I'm gonna let Joey talk right now.
I don't have any slides.
That's all right.
Yep.
But just, if you want to, just tell them Joey in your own work. Joey did row rice, okay? And actually, his yield is a little higher than John's, but we don't give the prize for yield. It's water use efficiency. AWD, 2 years in a row, has had higher water use efficiency than any row rice field we've done. And, you know, I don't favor one or the other, but, you know, just whatever you do it well, right? They both can be done well, and they should fit the field. You know, when Ray's talked this morning, Ray could be up here with us. He plays fourth in soybeans, but he was in the contest, right? And, you know, anyway, this Joey's field is, you know, he did everything right this year.
Well,
Centuries out there, you name it, he was doing.
yeah, I wanted to start with my interest in water efficiency is out of necessity. I'm on top of one of the critical groundwater use areas in northeast Arkansas, so I have to be concerned about water, and that is, I wake up every morning thinking about what is my family, what are my kids, what are people after me going to do for water in this critical groundwater use area. So that is my number one reason to be interested in efficiency. So I started 4, maybe 5 years ago, looking at moisture sensors. Dr. Henry's been coming to my farm for a few years now, and we've adopted a lot of practices on our farm just because we knew that it was something we needed to be looking at. So we've looked at sensors, we've looked at flow meters, we've looked at several different ways adopting practices that would help us to be more efficient. So last year, it's been all about an education for me anyway. I've been learning about how we become more efficient, and to be able to work with these guys, extension, the people that I could think the list would be way too long, so I won't do that. But I really appreciate the education that I've gotten from these folks about water efficiency. So last year when we started I was really excited about having a contest that we could actually see how we compare what we're doing and how we can be better at what we're doing. We started out bad. We used the field last year, much like all my fields. The water use for the field is very high. So we pump 24 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, and then we had all kinds of problems with weeds in that particular field. But the outcome was really good. Would rank like 3rd or 4th, I think, last year, and it was a very sandy loam field. Pigweed, we had all kinds of problems, and we still done okay, you know. So that kept my excitement up about the possibility of being able to grow rice with less water, and how do we do it. So this year we entered again, and it was another field that I pumped 6-7 days a week, 24 hours a day on levees that you'd think would, no way you can make it work in row rice, but we did. And because of the adoption of a lot of practices that these guys have taught me, it's been a very good experience. We used the moisture sensors. I would look at that every morning, every night. I would know exactly where I was at, when it was time to start the well, and I would even use it to shut it off. Within a few hours of it being wet, it's time to shut it off. There's no reason to keep pumping if you're finished watering. So with everything that we used, knowing the flow of the well, knowing for sure that the water's going out there, and being able to make sure that the water was getting through the field was a very good experience for me.
He had his beds were right. You know, he used hybrid rice. That's pretty important. We've learned that, you know, from experience. You know, his irrigation schedule was good. It was, you know, he's got a good scout. You know, he didn't get into heavy weed pressure, or, you know, pest pressure. Didn't get out of hand.
Yeah, I heard Ray say this morning when he was talking. Overlaying residuals is very important in row rice. I know this discussion is not necessarily about row rice, but overlaying residuals is very important in row rice.
All right. All right. Now, Shane's right. He's a first place winner. He's got a great story to tell. I'm gonna let him tell it, not me.
Well, I was just showing him a yield map from the 2018 contest. I did not win it. You can see on the yield map, green on all sides. I cut this field at like 2 or 3 a.m. You know, that's just the way it was. And so I stripped out, you know, where the plot was going to be. I skipped a big spot, you know, where I could get my 3 acres, you know, because it's 3 a.m. I asked them to come out at dark, but I'm not going to ask them to come out at 3 a.m. So we cut, and on both sides of it, it's just crystal pretty green, you know, and then I skipped this spot. Anyways, come back, I don't know, after several of those rains of 2018 harvest we had, you know, the yield map goes from green to orange. And so, anyways, had a bad taste in my mouth, but we tried it again this year, and it all came together. But this year and last year too, I overwatered last year, and we had sensors out. I don't think the sensors were working properly. This year they worked perfectly, and I'd call him, Greg, I got to water. No, don't turn the wells on. There's plenty of water there. Greg, I have to water. This is like 2 days later. Greg, look, I've got to water. No, you have plenty of moisture there. Don't turn the well on. Greg, I'm watering every other field around it, but I'm going to trust you on this field. So anyways, the sensors really showed me a lot this year. It was eye-opening, you know, for, it's always been, you know, if you see that silver tinge, you know, like everybody says, then soybeans, you know, it's time to water. So apparently it's not. It's the sensors. I don't know if you can see my acre uses last year and then my acre uses in last year's corn. It'd be ridiculous how much water I was able to save this year, and that's strictly with working with him and working with the sensors. As far as management on soybeans, we always just try to get them planted as quick as you can get them planted. I mean, don't treat soybeans as the second crop. Treat them as the first crop, just like you treat any other crop. Plant them first part of April. April 12th is my favorite day. It's the day that I've had the most luck with consistently is around that April 12th date. I think this year we planted the 22nd, something like that. So it's really close to that date. It's just 2019 wasn't a good year either to start off with. There's you know, soybeans, you know, make their own nitrogen. 100 bushel soybeans takes just as much nitrogen as 300 bushel corn. And so as any way that I can get that plant to make more nitrogen, I'm going to do it. So we always inoculate our seed so we can get the most out of all those, the rhizobia and all of that in the soil. And I'm working with, and another way to save water is to let your soil do more for you. I mean, and that's the whole deal with the soil health and cover crops and everything. I'm not implementing the cover crops, but I am doing a lot of stuff to try with the microbes and everything in the soil to be able to go and get water and bring it back, because I mean, they will do that if it's healthy enough soil. I'm trying to do a lot more research and stuff on that. But in season, it was literally just calling Greg and being like, hey, I need water, and him telling me no, and don't crank them up, you know. And so I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, that's what I went to another soil moisture sensor session the last hour. That's what we see over and over everywhere we go is when people go from, you know, irrigating based on experience or however you want to say it, to using sensors. Your natural reaction is to doubt sensors, isn't it? I mean, yeah. And you know, if you, it's almost, it's a little bit like, you know, your relationship with your Creator. There's faith there. You can't. There are components you cannot see. To start with, you have to take it on faith, right? And so, you know, once you get past that, you see the result. You don't have to go on faith anymore. You will see a result, and it's a good result. I'm a believer in sensors, and you know, James went through that. There are others who entered the contest and went through that very same thing, and it works. It helped them win. And let's move on.
James, I got a quick question. You said you were still watering all the fields around it. How did that compare to the field that won wise.
Yeah, wise. Yeah. The field, this contest field, it's just really good ground. You can talk all you want to, it's dang good ground. And, I mean, I had it entered in the corn last year, and it was in the 270s. You know, it's just a good field. The fields around it are not that good. The only thing that I saw from monitoring with the soil sensors is you have to be, don't just put one set out there. Because there's different, and you can see on the yield map even from this year, there's hot spots, and they're not sand blows because it's not a sandy field, but there's hot spots. And so when I'm cutting it, and there's spots, you know, I'm watching my yield monitor, you know, and I'm up there, and then it drops down, you know, 20, 30 bushels, and then it comes back up, you know, and that's those sand blows, and I didn't have sensors in there. So if we'd had sensors in there, I think that if we would have watered maybe a little bit quicker, I don't think we had needed to hold 2 more irrigations, but I think if we'd have watered just a little bit quicker, a time or two, I would have had a more even field. But I mean, as far as the overall field average, you know, it did fine. Yeah. But I think I could have picked up a few bushels on those hot spots here and there because I think they went instead of that silver tints, they went to full blown curling up and like shrinking. You know, and so that's the only thing I think that you need to have you need to pick out those. You can pick those from your previous yield maps, put some sensors there, and then kind of use don't go completely off of those because you'll way overwater. But
use an average.
Yeah, I don't even know an average, maybe like a 70-30 or something.
Wait.
How about, you feel good enough with the sensors now that you feel comfortable making those calls on your own, or do you think you still need to work with Greg?
No, I'm definitely going to work with Greg. He lost me just hooking the things up. I mean, putting them in the ground. So I'm buying more sensors and I'm putting them on other farms strictly from working with him on this. And then I'm gonna be like, hey Greg, I know you're busy with this contest, but I need your help.
Were you looking at the graphs that the sensors were getting, or was that on Greg's phone, or did you have?
Yeah, he gave me the login and stuff, and I'm looking at it. And mainly I would call him and be like, hey, this says don't water, but I need to water, and then he's having to tell me not to.
It's very straightforward. You know your soil type, and you know your crop. We have pretty good, you know, trigger points for each crop.
Well, he had to drop the trigger point because I bugged him so much.
Well, you know, I heard this in the talk with the professor from Georgia. People would call this guy from Georgia saying, should I trigger at 38 or 42? And he's like, look, you can't see the forest for the trees, you know. That's a little too much detail, okay? That's a little too detailed. If you know, I want you to trigger about 60, but if you want to trigger at 50, I'm not going to lose sleep over that. Just don't trigger at 30. Don't trigger at 110. You know.
So was 60 y'all's trigger?
Well, yeah, I think I first told him 65, and I said if it makes you feel more comfortable, trigger sooner. That's okay. I mean, that's a small change.
And a quarter-inch rain, you know, it made a big difference too. Because we got several quarter-inch rains that probably didn't show up.
I don't know how many times I've said it this year. These sensors are more valuable in a rainy year than they are in a dry year. I mean, it's obvious what you got to do when it stops raining completely. It's like being a farmer in Arizona or something when you go through a drought. You just, you know, you could almost get on the calendar with it. But, you know, probably what you would see in a dry year is the sensors go dry and they stay dry no matter what you do until it rains.
What was your grass trigger number?
About
35, 38.
Okay. We need to move along. This is our second place winner in soybeans, and he can't be here. He had business at the bank. Couldn't miss. And Beckton Bell, he's owns at Bassett, Arkansas, and the field was at Dice, Arkansas. Some of the heaviest clay on earth. That's where Johnny Cash is from. And they didn't do anything except schedule well. He learned to schedule using sensors. He uses sensors, but he didn't have sensors in his field. They don't do anything extraordinary. Our rules for our contest don't talk about how to manage your farm, how to manage your field outside of, allowing us to measure the irrigation water and the rainfall. So, you know, he didn't do any foliar feed, he didn't do any extra, any kind of fertilizer or insecticide or fungicide. It was just good variety selection and good irrigation schedule. He placed second. Well, keep going the wrong way. This is our third place soybean winner. He's entered 2 years in a row, and for the life of me, I don't know why, but he did. He stayed with us. I'm glad he did. I'm really glad he did, but I don't know why he did. But just because of the year we had, you know, he was same way. He uses sensors in other places. He uses surge valves in other places, but not in this field. It's just good variety selection and good irrigation scheduling. All right, Carl is with us, and I'm gonna let you tell what you think happened, Carl.
I want to respond to his question
Okay.
about watering the fields all around. We had a field 3 years ago, it was a 40-acre field split in 2 20s. One side we watered the way we'd always watered. The other side we watered with meters. The field with meters was watered 2 less irrigations and cut about 3 to 4 bushels better. The really big thing that stuck out on my, I wish I had a picture of it. On my yield map, you can see the combine speed. The side that was watered more was cut about 2 miles an hour. The better side was cut 5 miles an hour because the one that's overwatered, the beans are laying there. What's that word? But that's just the answer to what you said about. Yeah, so.
It's worth something.
Yeah.
Time's worth something.
I was in the contest because of the weather. My county agent, Rick Wimberly, called me in the middle of June and said, hey, have you watered corn yet? In the middle of June, yeah, you better water corn, but no, we hadn't this year. So that actually helped me out getting in the competition.
Yeah.
Soil monster meters I've been using for 3 years. The first year I had them, the second, watching my neighbor, watching my father-in-law actually, who I used to work for, and done all his irrigating. He kept irrigating the same way. I was irrigated by the sensors. When I saved the second irrigation, I went and bought some more and put the beans in. That irrigation right there almost gonna pay for it. Not seeing any yield loss. As far as numbers, that's something you gotta play with. I think we can all throw out a number up here, but till you go put it on your farm and watch it, push it as far as you can. When you push it too far, you know, because you can't get caught up. So that's just kind of a play with by yourself. But I firmly believe in the moisture meters. I'm kind of like, I've got a 16-year-old at home, and that's all he wants to do farming. And we're in a critical groundwater. If we keep watering the way we have in the last 30 years, there won't be water.
We can't sustain what we're doing now.
Yeah. So it's as much to me about water conservation as it is saving money, saving water and making money.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Appreciate you coming. This is our second place winner in corn. Terry and Clay Smith, and they're here, and they're not with us, but
Clay's actually doing the presentation right now about the cover crops that they use.
there's a whole lot of sessions here where they, you know, 2 at the same time that I want to see, and they're great. They're doing everything they can do. Most people aren't ready for cover crops yet, but they jumped in with both feet. And I bumped into Clay, just dumb luck, and he saw the flow meters in my truck and said, "You got those contests? I want to do the contest." And look, they got second place. So they're doing, sensors, cover crops, minimum till, no till when they can. Every practice that NRCS supports, they're doing it, and it paid off for them.
The water never got to the end of the field, so.
Yeah, well, in a rainy year, sometimes those things, work out. Things that would be a problem in a hot, dry year, it was in his favor this year. And then Greg Boss is our third place winner in corn, and he's doing the same way. He's doing everything right. And I'll let him tell you what he thinks.
Greg will make me bring soil moisture monitors out, put it in the fields, but the contest field, he uses his own because he doesn't want me to see what he did.
Can I say one more thing?
Actually, you'll be able to see it.
One more thing I want to say is, one thing that all these people have in common is, just like you know your farm better than anybody. For the contest, we want you to enter the contest, but for the contest, you pick your field with the highest yield history. You're not going to overcome low yield history with good management. So if you want to win the contest, pick your field with high yield history.
All right, well, let's see if I can figure this out here. Here should only be that picture.
There's several ways to do it. Arrows.
Arrow, right,
Right and left. Other way.
All right, so, you have one of the
Keep going, there you
pictures.
go. Keep going.
All right.
There we go.
So just like everybody else, we use moisture sensors. We have a weather station for our corn. We have a weather station in our peanut fields with sensors. And we have a weather station in our soybean field with sensors as well. So we got one field of each crop, but that one set of sensors pretty well tells me how to water all the other fields. So I think we were using moisture sensors before Dr. Henry got out of college. But one way or another, we've been playing with him for a long time, but he's been a great asset to us. And yeah, I didn't borrow his this year, but I borrowed him from NRCS. So far I haven't bought my first sensor, but I have probably 50 standing around upon them with different companies helping us out. And NRCS gave us a surge valve to test on this field as well. And so the simple way to keep records is your iPhone and your camera. Every time I turn my pump on, I lift the lid, it tells me the flow. It tells me, actually our dates aren't on this picture, but I know the date and time that picture was made. And when I turn it off, I take a picture of the meter so I can read the meter. So every time I turn it on and off, I know exactly how many gallons of water I put out. And we did water our corn 3 times this year. And the picture is a little bit backwards here, we go back to this. But this is the picture that tells us everything we need to know about soil sensors. And where's my pointer?
Thank you for
Well, there it is. There it is.
There you go.
All right, so you can't see all the writing, but this is June 8th. These are watered 3 times. And there we go. We watered around the June 8th. We watered, this was a rain. We watered July 6th. We really let it get dry on July 6th. And we were trying to hit this 50 number. And then we watered again on July 23rd, which was right in this area. It was getting late in the year. We just felt like we needed water. But the sad thing is we had a 2-inch rain today after we finished watering right here. So there was 2.5 inches of water that we could have saved. But in any case, this is a water event. This is a water event. This, I actually let it get dry. No, I'm sorry. This is a rain event. It was time to water, but we saw rain coming, so we let the rain take it all back to total saturation here. And then here, we let it really get dry, but we knew we were looking for rain, but we didn't get it. And here's where we watered, and before I got through watering, we had 2 inches of rain on the field, so it totally saturated the ground. And then one last time here, we felt like we wanted to rain again. We wanted to water again just to be sure to finish the crop off in good time. I think that was on the 23rd of July. So each time we can tell exactly how much we watered, but also all of these others were rain events. Here's a rain, here's a rain, here's a rain event, and then rain events here out just before harvest. So you know your profile of moisture all year long, and you don't have to pull this whole chart up every day, but it's simple on your phone. You know exactly what your profile looks like at any given time, and man, it's just taking all the guesswork out of it.
The only guesswork is, am I gonna get a 1/4 inch rain or am I gonna get a 2 inch rain tomorrow? And that's when you know when to water and when to not. But in any case, I've been involved with this contest both the last 2 years, and I think I'm in 3rd place each of the last 2 years, but it's great to be a part of it, and it's taught me more and more about what we need to do to get better at water, to get better at using all the technology. And, from flow meters, surge valves, weather stations, moisture sensors, and you gotta look at it all over the farm. It really does make a difference in how we're managing everything. Sooner or later, we're gonna get better at it. Thank you.
Pipe planner.
Pipe planner, I skipped it.
That's the place to start. Pipe planner is the place to start.
We never use pipe planner on this field and all the other irregular fields. And other fields I've been putting it out for 40 years. I've just about got it figured out. But pipe planner works, and I recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, pipe planner is just something that like, it's kind of like putting, what do you call it? Kind of like putting agritain on urea, like if you just do it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, you come to these things and they tell you to put agritain on urea. Yeah, no duh, like we've been doing that forever. Like pipe planner is just another thing like that.
Stop debating it, just do it.
Yeah.
Greg, I've got a comment I want to tell you that we're thinking about doing on our farm. You know, you want to have sensors in every field. I mean, after you've got them, you think, man, I want them in every field. And then you've got, if you're a corn farmer and a soybean farmer, years ago, we didn't irrigate soybeans until we finished the corn because we was towing pivots, you know. And so the concept of thinking, well, you're getting a little behind on your soybeans, you can. But what we're going to do this upcoming year is we're going to put sensors in our soybean fields and then use a handheld there until we get almost done with the corn. Then we can move our aqua tracks over there and then use them to finish out. And then, but you need to place your sensors when the soybeans are small to where they'll grow in.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there are a lot of things about using sensors that you have to learn by doing it. And that's one of them. There's no way to have enough sensors, so you have to learn to spread that information in a way that is manageable for you. You know, I mean, I like to, you know, if you get one set of sensors out, manage several fields with it that are similar. You know, you shouldn't be trying to manage sensors in a field that's clay and the field beside it the same way as sand. You can't do that. But if you have several similar fields, you can use one set of sensors, and you probably do them in order anyway.
You also can put sensors in the ground without the aqua tracks and manually read those sensors.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
and then eventually you can pull them up, but manually read those sensors, it's not as easy.
I'm glad you said that, Greg, because that relates to our schools. We're doing 5 irrigation schools this spring, and we want to invite you. We've always had a big one in Stuttgart, and we're not doing it that way this year. So we've got 5 scheduled out. And what you're going to get, if you come to one of our schools, is you're going to get, you're going to learn. You know, we're going to answer your questions about pipe planner. We're going to teach you how to use a surge valve. We're going to teach you how to use sensors to schedule irrigation. We're going to help you learn how to build sensors, and then you go home, have your farm hands building those sensors for the whole farm. It's the most cost-effective way to get started. You're going to leave our irrigation school with enough equipment to begin using sensors at the most cost-effective way. That's the manual reader. And then February 11th, we're going to be in Jonesboro, and February 13th, we're going to be in Walnut Ridge. February 18th, we'll be in south of the Arkansas River in Dumas. And March 3rd, we'll be in Searcy. March 6th, we'll be in Winter. And, you know, we invite you to come to our irrigation school. And we don't hit every county every year as we do with production meetings. We kind of alternate. You know, last year we were in a completely different set of counties, but we're trying to blanket all of East Arkansas. And that's our set for this year. It'll be a different set next year. And, you know, the meeting in Dumas right now, we're going to be working with Matt Lindsay here from Delta Plastics, and we invite their participation, all of them with us. And so we're going to answer your pipe cleaner questions, that's the place to start. We're going to answer your surge valve questions, we're going to answer your watermark sensor questions. And, Dr. Henry can answer questions above that, but I'm going to refer you to him after that.
Well, we've kind of gone over time. Does anybody have any questions or?